what are some things we can do as community members, and what actions the Democratic caucus, the Congressional Democratic Caucus is doing, as well as the Hispanic caucus and other congressional subcommittees are working on. So, the threat of mass deportations is real. And the Congressional Democratic Caucus is working, taking the steps needed to challenge these through litigation. So the hope is that it will delay, it'll buy us more time, and hopefully, the courts will realize the impacts, and vote in favor of common sense and human rights. So other things that we discussed, is that Congress is already looking at bills that will pave the way to dismantle departments like the Department of Education, which will have detrimental impacts not just on our immigrant population, but on all students. The impact to students with disabilities who are protected through IDEA and Title I, as well as students that schools, as mentioned before, are safe spaces, that ICE cannot come in and raid these spaces. So, we run the risk of not having those protections anymore. The other issue that came up that we discussed, and this happened during the last Trump administration in 2017, with the border closures, and border communities where they had checkpoints in native lands. So, and there were indigenous people who lived on the reservation who were detained, or, for not having proper identification, accused of coming over illegally. So that, it was the racial discrimination that occurred. Something that happened with my cousin, that happened in 2017. He was detained in Baja for over 48 hours because he didn't have proper identification. He's a proud Chicano who was born and raised in California and doesn't even speak Spanish, but because the border agencies said he didn't have proper identification to prove his citizenship, they detained him in Mexico. So we run the risk of not just undocumented, but also citizens, people who live on the reservation, Hispanic community, all. So it runs, and any person of color who might be a target. So that's a real concern that we have. Some of the things that we talked about was the importance of funding our nonprofits, and that was mentioned and then reiterated again and again. So looking to our county and our local, when we have our housing and human services grants offering, that we make sure that we are adequately funding and giving the grants that are needed so they can to support this work that they're doing. We did touch a little bit about, the threat to nonprofits was real. The congressman did mention that they could lose, they're looking at putting legislation that could classify them as a terrorist organization if they are helping undocumented or LGBTQ or trans, that they run the risk of losing their C-13 status. So how we can go around to protect that. Something that we can do as residents is the messaging, making sure that we send out the right narrative and explain it. I had that written down in my notes. I have lots and lots of notes here, but making sure that our narrative is balanced in what the facts are. So when the Representative Velasco had brought up data points, the impacts to the workforce in Colorado, the impacts, the compelling statistic that 80% of ag labor is made up of migrants. I mean, that's going to have a detrimental impact on our food supply and our food chain. So making sure that we are getting that through to not just our representatives, but to all to make sure that we are reaching out to every single one representative, no matter where they stand on the issue, and but especially the ones who don't align and don't understand that if we are sending out those messages that tell them, hey, these are going to be the detrimental impacts to our community, to our nation as a whole, the foundation of our nation in attaining food and our workforce, that that could help change the narrative or tone things down a bit, that rhetoric. Um, some of the action items that we discussed were looking at the Know Your Rights training, supporting agencies that do already do this work, like CERC, which I'm very proud to share that one of my former first graders, Kaylee Leone, is the Northern Regional Director to CERC. So it was very exciting to hear that. So we get together often. As well as and other pieces that we as local leaders can ensure that happen are training for our public safety officers. So I'll share the document with you, but our Longmont city does we do have a policy with respect to undocumented residents. It is really important that our residents are contacting public safety in the event, especially with domestic violence, or if they run the risk of losing house, or they're in a mental health crisis or need physical aid, that they access those things. So in a statement and in our policies on our website, the City of Longmont does provide services to any resident or community, notwithstanding their immigration status. So our officers will not ask if they are legal, if they're documented or undocumented. City of Longmont Public Safety proactively encourages our undocumented immigrant community to access public safety services whenever needed. So there is a lot of community outreach already happening in our spaces. A couple of big spaces that serve my students in Indian Peaks and also Sunset Middle, Countryside Village Mobile Home Park, and Casa de la Esperanza. And we've had our staff, along with public safety, reach out and have community meetings for individuals so they know what the process is. So they know if they need connections to support services or nonprofits, they have those contacts, as well as connections with children's, youth, and families for resources, for daycare and other needs, that they don't run the risk of exposing themselves, but how we can do this work with them discreetly. The City of Longmont Public Safety has not and will not participate in the Homeland Security 287G program, which trains local police officers to assist in the identification and detention of undocumented immigrants. So once an individual is arrested and they're put into the jail system, then it becomes, Boulder County. So we are very much aligned in what Boulder County is doing, and it was very reassuring to hear the DA discuss that what we do at the local level those protections will also be in place at the county and state level. So the City of Longmont Public Safety will enforce all local and state ordinances, statutes, regardless of immigration status. So we have some very strong leaders in our state that have passed laws that protect human and civil rights. So, as long as those are in place, we plan to honor those. So it's really important that our community know and understand that, so that they are continuing to call public safety. And our one of the things, when a conversation we had with our public safety chief, Zach Artis, was that they reassured the mayor and I that if an individual, police officer comes in contact with an individual and they find out that that person is undocumented, the police officer cannot, as his role as police officer, he acquired this information through his role as a police officer, cannot contact ICE. If they do, they run the risk of losing their job or disciplinary action. So there are protections for people, and we have systems in place that would prevent public safety officers from contacting ICE through their duties in their role as a police officer or public safety officer in Longmont. So yeah, and as well as we had talked with children's, youth, and families as well, and I have a newsletter that I can share out, and I'll put some resources in the chat if they're not already in the resource document that can help individuals through getting social services supports, but also knowing how to shift accounts. So if we have an individual who's undocumented who has their Nextlight or their utility billing under their name, that we can aid them, assist them with having that shifted to another individual in the household. So and that would still keep the person anonymous and protected. So those are kind of a couple of things we're doing with at the city and the and through our community and through our Latino advisory community. But I do want to circle back, and this where Allie and Michelle can jump in as well. Is we had a discussion around the Department of Ed, and there is, we saw with who they wanted to appoint, who he wants to appoint for the director for the Department of Ed, and it's pretty frightening. The idea is that they dismantle the Department of Ed, and other agencies, other departments would absorb different entities, like our lunch program that would go to, the FDA, or Title I that might go to Housing and Human Services. So an IDA, where would that fall under? Just other agencies. So there would be more red tape. There would be less access. I have a son who was on for autism. He was on an IEP plan, and even through all these protections we have in place now, it's still very challenging to navigate and know what our rights are as a parent. So imagine what's going to happen in the future when if he's successful in dismantling the Department of Ed. We're gonna run the risk of having more discrimination, going back to the days when, like my dad, when he went to school, where they put people of color all in one class with people with disabilities, and then there was everybody else. So it was a very discriminatory. We're just starting to make headway, and now we're taking a quick 180 backwards. So we want to put an end to that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Susie, very much for that. And I'm not sure who wants to speak next. Would it be Michelle or Allie?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go next because I'm going to speak sort of from the state level components. We're going to kind of scale down. Susie gave a great description federally. I'm going to do state, and Allie is going to do super local from the perspective of a teacher. So my name is Michelle. I'm a UNISERV director with SVVEA and PEA, which are the education associations in Poudre and St. Vrain school districts. I also work really closely with the state education affiliate, Colorado Education Association, also called CEA. So today I'm just speaking as an individual. I'm kind of giving you a synthesis of the trainings and the things that I have heard from the state and national level education associations, given that we're kind of in a bit of a chaotic space regarding what the policies that Susie described, like how are they actually going to be rolled out. So since we don't know, we are kind of focusing on first making sure everyone knows their rights, and first talking to teachers about what are their concerns. So currently, they are doing Know Your Rights training at the state level, specifically around, what teachers can and can't do to protect immigrant students, where the rules that are an actual rule versus an unwritten rule, and taking a sort of labor union approach to analyzing school districts' board policies and contracts to see where are the overlaps between the employee and worker rights space and, having the opportunity for advocacy to help protect immigrant students and families. So educators are currently reporting that they are worried about just this. What do and don't they have to share with authorities in the event that they are interviewed regarding students or families? So CEA is distributing a sort of cheat sheet, which I'm happy to provide if you all are interested, about how educators should handle these situations, even including scripts of how they should handle it. A vulnerability in this regard is sort of something akin to Garrity rights, if you're familiar with that, which is the process through which an employer can compel employees to participate in an interview with them as their employer that remains separate from any law enforcement interviews that may need to be conducted if there's, an implication that a law has been broken. So the questions that we still have is, for example, will a teacher be disciplined for disrupting an ICE investigation occurring at a bus stop, or refusing to share information with ICE about students or families? So no one really knows right now. So in anticipation of having to defend some of these cases, CEA is diverting some staff time and resources to the attorneys to research and prepare to really protect any teachers in these situations. But a lot of it is really going to depend on individual school districts and kind of how they're going to handle these hypotheticals when they arise. Across the state broadly, school districts are not taking stances on this issue. I think everyone's kind of in a bit of a wait and see. And I bet a lot of the how this actually hashes out is going to be really reactionary. So sort of in a situation by situation basis. So as was mentioned before, some folks talked about the sensitive spaces and its vulnerability, so we don't need to go over that again. Specifically to education, there's a bit of concern about a state level policy associated with the READ Act, which collects information on if students speak English at home. That is a bit of a vulnerability to profiling of families, so educators have expressed concern about that. The way we could get this overturned would be through a state level lobbying effort to get state legislators to be willing to make some revisions to the READ Act to protect students. Another area where we have leverage is in FERPA, which is the Family Education Records Privacy Act. This does protect students identifying information outside of situations in which the student is reasonably considered to have committed a crime and then only to law enforcement. So this is why what Susie mentioned with municipal police is super important. Because again, if we have a situation where a municipal police department is demanding that a school registrar disclose information to her, are the police going to come in and enforce this? That's really the question, because ICE can't go into the school themselves and get it. So lobbying with your municipal police departments is actually an opportunity to get some of these things changed. So one thing that CEA is kind of cautioning everyone about, and NEA as well, is to make sure that allies in this case, which is, most of the teachers in Boulder County are frankly, the allies are not overstepping the wishes of the people they're seeking to help. Because sometimes the people we're seeking to help don't want us to go make a stink to the school district to start making demands like, rah, rah, what are we going to do about this? Maybe those people want us to take a different message or no message. So the state and federal union affiliates are really saying, please, please, please listen to the community and don't sort of jump ahead and start doing things. So at this time, we're kind of sticking in the know your rights / defending against teachers and making sure that they feel empowered to protect students from the teachers union space. So Allie is going to talk a little super locally about what SVVEA is doing regarding this.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Allie DiCaro. I am one of the board members of the St. Vrain Valley Education Association, and I'm also a special education teacher in Longmont. I sit as the chair of, or one of the chairs of our SVVA Equity Council that we have, we started prior to the election, my cat gets really involved in Zoom calls, and I thought it had been long enough that she would not get excited about this.
We welcome cats. We welcome them.
Something we had started is there has been concern statewide as well locally around the supports for our newcomer students. So any students who are new to the U.S. and the supports they are receiving when they come into our school communities, as well as making sure educators have the supports they need when serving these students. We have held two trainings as well as brainstorming sessions with our equity council and are continually looking for members of the community who can also help us support and tell us, like Michelle said, what priorities they have, especially now with the incoming administration. And we have been looking at Know Your Rights training for educators around discrimination and knowing your rights around discrimination, as well as informing educators what discrimination can look like, including microaggressions, and many ways that many of our educators can participate in discrimination unknowingly. So those are the two big things we are working on as our equity council, as well as we will be working during the legislative session to lobby and talk to our local legislators around what we need for public education. At this point, as with always, especially in Colorado, funding is one of our most important asks as the union. Without it, we are unable to support students in the ways they need support and educators, and increasing educators of color and of migrant and immigrant status in order for our students to see themselves in their classrooms is really important. So those are the things we're working on locally.
Thank you, Allie. We have a couple minutes for questions. Jake Marsing has his hand up.
I think he's trying to unmute or he's signing. So
there we go. That's good. Thank you. Hi, everybody. First of all, Susie, Allie, Michelle, thank you so much for the presentation. Go SVVEA. My question though was for Susie. Susie, one of the things that you mentioned specifically on the city side was about the nonprofit funding process, and obviously that process is. I'm pretty familiar with it. I was vice chair of that board once upon a time. Pretty tied up in, like Eliberto does a great job. The team in that department do a great job. The matrix there has always frustrated me a little bit because it is not super responsive to things like what we're talking about. Things like the needs of specific communities in specific moments. So I guess it's more of a request than a question, although I'd be curious as to your thought about what can be done to make some of these more entrenched systems, like a nonprofit matrix, more responsive to the needs of communities in moments like this.
And yes, so I've already been in conversations with Christina and Eliberto on the topic, and looking at what do we need to do? I mean, obviously it just happened for this past cycle, but moving forward, especially over the next 4 years, what do we need to do on this matrix that will be more flexible in allowing for resources for education purposes, resources and funding for that protect that we're able to I don't want to say disguise, but just kind of put in a more subdued way that will allow allow entities who are servicing undocumented people who don't have access to other support systems because they're not a citizen, that how that can be offset through our through how we fund. Does that make sense? Okay.
No, it does. And through how I don't mean to make create a back and forth. That's great. But just how we consistently engage, because so much of the nonprofit community in the city does great work, but it doesn't always show up in these kind of matrices where you have like these kind of structures in place because folks don't engage in certain ways, or the board isn't the right makeup, or so
yes.
I appreciate all your work, Allie.
Yeah. And I think also too, looking at, and this was a conversation I'd had when I was first elected with Jim Golden, in looking at priority-based budgeting. So, and maybe looking at it through an equity lens. So how, looking at funding our nonprofits, but making sure we are tapping into that equity, looking at it through an equity lens. So one of the things that I pointed out is we have this priority-based budgeting where it puts percentages, it ranks them based on the percentages of the community that uses a program or a department, any service that the city provides. However, if that entity or if that department or program services only 15% of the community, that would get a lower ranking. However, if of that subcommittee, that subgroup, 99% of that 12% use and depend on that service, then we need to move it higher up in the priority because it's addressing an issue, a segment of the population that number-wise it might not be there, but it's impactful for that subcommittee, for that sub-community group. So looking at things through that lens as well. Yeah, so I hope that helped. Yep.
Are there any other questions for this group? Well, thank you so much for being here.
I think we forgot to address the school board issue. It is very challenging. I would say right now, something if you all want to do is reach out to your current school board representative for your area and schedule a meeting with them. I have tried as a staff person, and it is very challenging because I get circumvented by administration. I won't name who, but I get circumvented and then I'm unable to reach my representative. So that could be something that having more public and community connection with our school board, who they are, where do they stand on the issues, because they're typically not, they're non-contested. They don't even make it on our ballot because they're just automatically in. So I think that would be something community people could do.
So Susie, are you suggesting like a group of parents?
Not even parents, you all are voters. Your taxpayer dollars fund.
Just like a group of people who are very transparent about their concerns.
Yes.
And say, we want to meet with you. And it's almost like if we could get this going as an action item, the school board would be overwhelmed with people calling, hey, you know what, hey, let's have coffee or whatever we have to do. Meet in the library, wherever, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I had to one year with a prior school board president, I figured out that he would jog Lake McIntosh on Sunday mornings. So I had to go coincidentally run into him there. I don't run, and I thought I was going to die, but I was able to get the issues out.
Hey, the things we do for love. Okay,
Oh,
so
it would be great if you
well, and what I'm struck by in Virginia, I don't want to take up too much time on this because I know we'll go to the next speaker. But Susie, the thing is that it's like this whole thing that's happening has individuals, marginalized group, people with a lot of fear. So it strikes me that the people who are in a position to really do something with the system to make it better, the attorney general, our district attorney, our law enforcement, that wonderful program you're talking about, if they can be very public about what they're doing to protect rights, they would not be putting anybody at risk or anything like that. Obviously, if there are processes that have to be sensitive and privacy concerns, they're going to do that anyway. But if they're very public about this is what we think is a right, and so we have this policy in our city council, we have this policy wherever, and this is what we're doing, and be very public about it so that other towns are like, wait a second, we could actually implement this without a lot of fanfare and just basically put it in place so people are protected. This is just something that I'm coming, because I think about now, we've got 56 people on the meeting still. Everybody is cooking with these types of ideas, listening to your very direct action concerns, and it's very sobering. But then what can we do to just be very open about how to make it right? So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, Marisa, I'm going to temper your enthusiasm by mentioning that Michelle Garrison told us to be sure to listen to our communities about the actions that
Yes.
we take.
Yes. She made a
And-
really good, she said, we are not, and I wrote it down. Make sure that allies are not overstepping the wishes of the people you are trying to protect. And so I think that's got to happen at the same time.
Okay, good.
I got it.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking with us this evening. We need to know what's going on locally and in our schools. And of course, school boards have been important for years, and they remain so. So thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. And our final speaker of the evening is Marta Locheman. And I hope she's still here with us. It's a little bit past her appointed speaking time, but Marta, there you are.
Yes, buenas noches.